I'm currently making this video in the second week of January 2025, and between the raging fires in Los Angeles and the hastening news cycle and potentially getting rid of TikTok, the world feels as crazy as it ever has. And I, as an artist who has been painting for 15 years and has been working in a professional capacity for approaching a decade now, I've often struggled with sort of vacillating between two extremes. On one hand, feeling like artists can make an impact and they can help the world, and then also feeling like art and the creation of art can feel very frivolous and superficial, and it can be hard to sort of talk about your art, especially in the context of social media where you can't control what your art is posted between. It might be two traumatic news stories and then you're there with your artwork. It can feel very sort of like a disembodied experience. And over the years, because that has felt very top of mind for me, I've read books on it, I've talked to other artists about it, and I, in this video, have cobbled together some concepts and philosophies to help you maybe have a more grounded sense of your purpose as an artist, especially without having to change the kind of art you make. I know that that is a response, that you should make art that's very direct and sort of activist, and I always push against that if that's not the art that you're naturally sort of compelled to make. I think that can be a great direction if it feels right. But in this video, I'm going to talk about Jenny Odell's book, How to Do Nothing. It's a absolutely fantastic book. I'm going to talk about how artists are mushrooms. Yes, you heard that right, mushrooms. A concept that I've been tending to for a while of the artist's role in activism, as well as showing you guys this painting I created. It's a snapshot of LA. I go out there kind of often. I love the city. I love the quality of light. It's beautiful. And I actually donated all the proceeds from the sale of this painting to families in Altadena who are affected by the fire. And so this video is about how we can help and what is the purpose of arts and artists in today's world. I'm hoping you walk away from this video feeling a little bit more grounded in your practice and with some ideas and concepts that help you find more solid emotional footing and what might end up being a hard year and what might feel like a very ever hastening news cycle. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, then stay tuned to today's video. First, I want to talk about the overwhelm in modern life. For so many of us artists, social media is how we reach our audience. I know that's absolutely the case for me. When I went to college, my undergrad for art, it was 2010 through 2014, and we were really shifting away from the only way to be a working artist was to go through brick and mortar galleries to social media being a viable option. And because of that, artists kind of for the first time ever are having to contend with a very legitimate, meaningful way to share their work and be a full-time artist through social media, and the new problems that arise with the new media. So if you think of a gallery, your artwork likely isn't sandwiched between two massive TVs playing whatever the breaking news of the day is, at least not most of the time. And unlike a traditional gallery, on social media, your work is often sort of coexisting in the same context as people's news consumption, their friends and family that may or may not be experiencing a natural disaster. And because of this, the struggle to not feel tone deaf is as present as ever. One of my favorite sayings is, read the room, right? I'm raising children. I'm trying to teach them about awareness. I say it all the time. I try to follow that wisdom in my own life. But you cannot read a room the size of the internet. And because of that, it feels like there's so much pressure for artists to always get it right and say the right thing and do the right thing and advocate for the right causes. And yet at the same time, we know that this pulls our attention in 50 different directions at any given time. And if you have created art, you know it's really hard for that kind of scattered focus to be helpful in making art. In Jenny Odell's book, she basically spends the first chapter talking about the nature of our attention and how artists in particular need that deeper focus of not scrolling between social media sites, but the kind of deep focus where you read a book or you make artwork and you're kind of tinkering over the finesse of like the exact color of, whatever you're painting. That kind of focus is hard to obtain in our current news media cycle. It sometimes feels like we're being asked to hold the entire weight of the world's problems at once, and this isn't unique to artists. I think anyone who consumes news on their phone or at such a rapid pace, everything from Palestine to Sudan to what's happening in the Congo, domestic crises, natural disaster. And as an artist, it's easy to wonder, well, what's the point of art when you're not directly fixing it? And I think a lot of us fall into the camp of, the themes in our art might tie into some greater causes on varying levels of abstraction, some more directly and some more loosely. And I know that when I was starting out as an artist, I felt an enormous pressure to kind of like pick a cause and make art about that. But the thing is that if that's not exactly where your heart is, it can be kind of not sustainable. And especially if it's not coming from a really authentic place, you can find yourself sort of experiencing whiplash of being pulled back and forth between causes. And Jenny Odell in the book argues that our attention is one of our most valuable resources we have. Social media thrives on keeping us scattered, reactive, and exhausted, jumping from one crisis to the next. But Odell suggests something radical, reclaiming our attention, choosing where to focus, and observing deeply. She says this is in itself a quiet act of resistance. But how does this idea of reclaiming attention connect to making art that really matters? I want to introduce you now to my mushroom theory. So basically, this is a metaphor that I came up with many years ago. I've always thought of it as artists are mushrooms. In nature, mushrooms break down decayed forest material into smaller parts, nutrients, things that other materials and animals can sort of consume, and it can enrich the soil, right? It has its own purpose. And it makes those nutrients digestible for other plants and creatures. Artists do something similar. We take the overwhelm and the messy material of life, whether it's grief, beauty, and justice, and we break it down into smaller works, more digestible pieces. And the way I like to think of this is that an artist kind of can't be everything. I mean, are there some artists who are able to sort of be an artist and an activist and a community leader all at once? I'm sure, yes, absolutely. And I say this out of deep respect for people who can juggle all of those things. I have so much respect for that. But I think especially as artists who are sort of starting and finding our footing, if we're early to mid-career, it can be sort of unrealistic to expect that of ourselves. Instead, if you take a more communal approach, that an artist's job exists within a larger movement of, for me, I make a lot of artwork breaking down sort of the mundane, the everyday. There's a lot of a class sentiment to a lot of my artwork. And I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, fixing any class consciousness in a large scale, meaningful way. But what I am doing is I'm taking my own lived experience growing up below the poverty line, and I'm synthesizing out some of these themes and tropes and visuals that represent it. And hopefully my audience, no matter how big or how small, walk away with a slightly different view of the world. In fact, in the book, How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, she talks about how one of the things that artists do is they physically change the way artists see the world. So I'm going to bring up Hockney again. But he did a series in Yorkshire, which is where he's from. And this part of England is, while beautiful, also sort of known for being dreary and dark and kind of gray. But Hockney, ever the artist who loves seeing color, was actually making these artworks. A lot of them were plein air paintings, and they were so colorful. And people who visited his exhibition of this work in Yorkshire said that when they re-entered the Yorkshire landscape, they saw colors that they never saw before. So an artist's job sometime is just to take a bit of the world, break it down into something that's more digestible, and then your audience walks away with a bigger, slightly different, slightly modified view of the world. And the thing is, I think sometimes that is just simply enriching someone's life in a way, right? And that has its own value to it. But one thing you could be doing is breaking down something that an activist may not have the time or bandwidth to break down, but an activist or someone who maybe could make impact, maybe they could vote on issues, maybe they could make writing with that new introspection found by the artist, can then contribute in a deeper, more meaningful way. So in that way, we can see that the artist, even if they just break something down or make something more digestible, as part of a larger ecosystem, has contributed. I have a whole podcast on this. I will link it in the show notes. If that is a thought that interests you, I have more to say on it. Definitely check that out. All this to say, art can feel very frivolous, but it's not. Whether your work tackles big social issues sort of intentionally, or it just captures the quiet beauty of a fruit stand, you're making observations that others can then build on. Activists, thinkers, and communities need what artists create to make their own work possible. So how can you take this idea? I would urge you to start by deciding where you want your energy to go. You don't have to respond to every crisis. Instead, focus on what moves you deeply. Your work will be more authentic and impactful and come from a place of care rather than obligation. One of the things I love about Jenny Odell's book is that she doesn't make this claim to sort of check out, protect your mental health in this sort of open, empty sort of way, which I think people who make that claim might mean well, but she also does a good job balancing the importance of cultivating that longer attention, which might mean unplugging from the news cycle, with the idea of cultivating that longer attention through art, through painting, through reading, through consuming longer forms of art as a way to be better at engaging. Think of the idea of quality versus quantity. Consuming lots of little bits of constant disaster can be really draining. Think of the idea of quality over quantity. It's hard to just sort of react, and our social media landscape is really fueled by everyone kind of making quick think pieces. And what Jenny Odell argues in her book is having that longer sort of making, maybe instead of a quick think piece written out on Instagram, making and dedicating a year to sort of a deeper concept, and then being able to offer that up. It's not to say that that's a perfect example or a perfect idea. Sometimes a quick think piece can be reactive in a way that does good, but it's rather being intentional and not just feeling like all of your thought and action is being swayed by the news cycle. Odell also emphasizes the power of slow, deliberate observations. As artists, this is our absolute strength. It's what we're good at. Often, I think about what makes an artist versus some other job or career, and I think a common thread amongst most artists, I would argue, is that they will spend forever on something that someone else would gloss over quickly, whether it's the actual painting process itself or the creation process, or thinking about whatever someone paints over and over and over, days on end, years on end. I think you have to be a little off the beaten path to pursue that as a career or a hobby. And so Jenny Odell argues that you should lean into that strength. By taking time to notice the details that others tend to overlook, your actions can reveal truths that often get lost in the noise and chaos. Your job isn't to solve everything, it's to create something that resonates. Whether it's beauty, grief, or hope, your work is often a bridge that others can cross. All this to say, this painting of a fruit stand might seem small, but for me, it's a way of paying attention to a city full of grief and resilience. As artists, we don't have to do everything, but I think it's important that if you can and if you feel called to, you can do something. By reclaiming our attention, observing deeply, and creating connections, we can be like those mushrooms, quietly but powerfully helping to break down the world around us for not only ourselves, but potentially for others. If you're an artist, I'd love to hear how you can reclaim your attention and how to make your art more meaningful, or maybe just acknowledge that your art is more meaningful without having to change what you're doing. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and of course, this isn't me saying that I have all the exact right answers of knowing how to deal with the craziness of the news cycle, but as we approach a new administration, I definitely recommend, if you have the bandwidth, reading Jenny Odell's book, because it was written in the wake of the first Trump presidency, and we know that one of his strategies is sort of to create a lot of media circus, and I know that attention is a very finite resource, even though it feels like it's everywhere. I also know that as an artist, being really intentional with what you focus on is important. And the reason why I really like this book, and I definitely recommend you listen to it, is because it's acknowledging the importance of focus and time and energy without completely opting out of helping the world. And I know for me, it was an important read. I hope you enjoy the book. Not Sorry Art School is currently enjoying this book together. This year, I'm doing a community engagement event with all of my lifetime students on the Kajabi community, which is our sort of message board where we talk about art and share ideas. But I've created a structure called the Year of Rest and Relaxation. And basically it is a 12-month outline. Every month has a book for basically a book club that we're going to read, and every month has a theme. So winter is about rest and observation and goal setting. In the spring, we'll be doing a lot of fun prompts and making art without judgment. And the summer, we're going to be doing a lot of work on refinement and narrowing down and picking your subject matter. And then fall is all about harvest and celebration. If that sounds interesting, you can become a lifetime member and not only get access to the 16 and counting art educational painting videos, but you can be part of the community and you can join us as we write down those goals and encourage each other in that community setting. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I would love to hear how your art is contributing and your plan for helping to maintain your attention in a ever crazier world. I'm also going to link resources if you feel so inspired to help and donate to some of the families who've been impacted by the LA fires. Thank you again. Take care. Happy creating, and I'll talk to you guys next week.